All right, so diving deep into the Salesforce API world today, wanna understand those real power moves,
Yeah,
right? We're talking about like streamlining these complex operations, boosting performance, making those integrations really sing.
absolutely.
And that is where I think the Salesforce Composite API comes in.
Mm,
We're going to be dissecting some excerpts from the technical docs today, kind of your guide to this game changer.
awesome.
Get ready to unlock some serious efficiency secrets here.
Love it. So the magic of the Composite API, it really lies in its ability to bundle multiple API requests.
Okay.
Think of them as individual tasks into a single call.
Okay.
So imagine you're orchestrating this symphony of data actions, right? You're creating records, updating fields, fetching information, all in one, like, harmonious execution.
Okay. I am intrigued, but wouldn't sending like a bunch of requests like all at once put a heavier load on the system?
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's where the brilliance of the Composite API kind of shines through. So instead of multiple back and forth trips, right, between your application and Salesforce, it's like sending a single well-organized package.
Okay.
And this dramatically reduces that network overhead,
Okay.
right, and then leads to faster processing, much smoother user experience, which is especially crucial, like, for mobile apps,
Yeah.
where every millisecond counts.
Yeah. So it's like optimizing for speed and efficiency,
That's
basically.
right.
So what kind of real world scenarios would demand this level of like API firepower?
Yeah, so consider like a fintech app, right? That's onboarding a new customer.
Right.
So you need to create that user account, verify their identity, set up their payment preferences, maybe even trigger a welcome email, right?
Wow.
All of this can happen in one meticulously orchestrated call with the Composite API. It ensures data integrity and that seamless user journey.
All right, that makes a lot of sense. But let's say I'm dealing with a massive amount of data. Are there any limitations to how much I can pack into a single composite API call?
Yeah, for sure. So while incredibly powerful, the Composite API, it does have some boundaries. So you can bundle up to 25 sub-requests, those individual tasks we talked about, into a single call. However, only 5 of those can be query operations, like searching for specific data using SQL.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's about strategically choosing like which tasks to bundle, considering both the volume and like the nature of the operation.
Exactly.
And of course, we got to be mindful of the Salesforce version too, right?
Absolutely. To unlock the full potential of the Composite API, you need to be on API version 43.0 or later. So it's like making sure that your tools are up to date for the job.
Upgrading.
Right.
Inevitable in the tech world, right?
All the time.
Got to stay ahead of the curve. Now, I'm curious about this concept of atomic transactions that keeps popping up. What's the deal with that?
Yeah, so atomic transactions are like the guardians of data integrity. It's an all-or-nothing approach. Think of it as a safety net, ensuring that if even one of your sub-requests fails, the entire operation is rolled back.
What?
This prevents partial updates and keeps your data consistent and reliable.
So it's like having this fail-safe mechanism to prevent like data chaos.
For sure.
But what if I need some flexibility? Are there scenarios where I might not want the all-or-nothing approach?
Yeah, and that's where things get even more interesting, right? So the L or none flag, which governs this behavior, can be incredibly useful, but also potentially restrictive. There are situations where you might want like partial success, even if some sub-requests fail. We can dive deeper into those nuances and how to handle them with conditional logic within the Composite API a bit later.
Okay, so there's like a whole nother layer of fine-tuning and control we could explore there.
Absolutely.
Now, before we get too deep into those specifics, can we walk through a practical example to see how this all comes together in a real request?
Absolutely. Let's revisit that fintech onboarding scenario we talked about.
Right.
Imagine we're creating a user account and instantly linking a bank account record to it. We can demonstrate how the Composite API orchestrates this with elegance and precision.
Okay, let's break down the request. How do we structure it to make sure everything kind of flows smoothly?
So we start by defining our composite request,
Okay.
which acts as the container for our sub-requests,
Right.
those individual tasks we want to execute.
Uh-huh.
Each sub-request will have a specific structure,
Okay.
defining the action we want to perform.
So it's like building a to-do list for the API,
Exactly.
outlining each step in detail.
Yeah, perfect analogy.
What would our first sub-request look like in this case?
So our first task is to create the user account.
Okay.
So we specify the HTTP method as post, indicating we're creating a new record.
Uh-huh.
Then we provide the URL, pointing to the user object in Salesforce.
Okay,
So it's like providing the API with the address of where to deliver this new record.
I like that. And how do we make sure this user account is linked to the bank account we're creating?
Yeah,
Is that where reference IDs come in?
that is exactly where reference IDs come in.
Okay.
So each sub-request gets a unique reference ID. Think of it as a label.
Okay.
We'll use this reference ID later to establish the relationship between the user account and the bank account.
Right.
We'll also include the necessary user details in the body of this sub-request.
Okay.
Things like username, email,
Right.
any other required fields.
Got it. So we've got the user account creation in motion.
Yes.
What about the bank account?
Right.
How does that sub-request take shape?
So the bank account sub-request, it follows a similar structure.
Okay.
We'll use post, again, since we're creating a new record.
Right.
Then provide the URL for the bank account object.
Okay.
And assign a new reference ID to this sub-request.
Right.
Of course, we'll include all the relevant bank account details in the request body.
But how do we link these two separate creations,
Yeah.
the user and the bank account, into like a cohesive whole?
That's where those reference IDs we mentioned earlier come into play.
Okay.
So in the bank account sub-request, we'll include a field that references the user account's reference ID.
Okay.
This creates a clear link between the two,
Right.
establishing that relationship within the context of this single composite API call.
So it's like weaving those connections right into the fabric of the request itself.
Exactly.
No need for additional API calls or complex logic to handle the linking.
You got it.
The Composite API streamlines this whole process,
Mm-hmm.
reduces the potential for errors,
Yep.
ensures that the user account and the bank account are created and linked in one atomic operation.
Exactly. One shot.
And we get a single unified response back from Salesforce, right?
Correct.
How does that help us understand what happened with each sub-request?
Yeah, so the response provides a clear picture of the outcome of each sub-request. So
Okay.
we'll see the HTTP status codes
Right.
indicating success or failure for each individual action. Plus, we get the data for each newly created record,
Right.
including their unique Salesforce IDs, making it easy to track and manage these newly minted entities.
This is starting to feel like a superpower for anyone working with Salesforce.
Oh, yeah,
But with great power comes great responsibility, right?
absolutely.
We talked about the Allernone flag earlier.
Mm-hmm.
How does that factor into this example?
Yeah, so let's imagine a scenario where the user account creation succeeds,
Okay.
but the bank account creation hits a snag,
Okay.
perhaps due to a validation rule
Right.
or some missing data.
Okay.
With the Allernone flag enabled, the entire transaction would be rolled back.
So even though the user account was created successfully,
Uh-huh.
it would be undone
Correct.
because the bank account creation failed.
Yes.
That seems pretty strict.
It might seem that way, but this strictness ensures data integrity.
Right.
In this case, we wouldn't want an orphaned user account without a linked bank account, right? It's about preventing inconsistencies and maintaining the reliability of our data.
Okay, I see how that can be beneficial in maintaining data quality.
Yeah.
But isn't there a risk of things becoming too rigid? What if we need some flexibility in how we handle success and failure within a composite request?
Yeah, you're right. There are situations where we might want to allow for partial success.
Okay.
Let's say creating a welcome email is part of this onboarding flow,
All right.
but it's not critical to the core account setup.
Right.
If the email fails for some reason, we might still want the user account and bank account to be created.
So how do we achieve that level of nuanced control within the composite API?
Right.
Does it involve ditching the Allernone flag altogether?
Not necessarily. So the Composite API offers ways to handle this through, like, conditional logic.
Okay.
We can specify that certain sub-requests are dependent on the success of others.
Okay.
In this case, we could make the welcome email creation contingent on the successful creation of both the user account and the bank account.
So we're introducing like a hierarchy of dependencies
Yes.
within our composite request.
Exactly.
If the foundational elements fail,
Uh-huh.
the dependent actions won't even be attempted.
You got it.
That's a pretty elegant solution.
It is. It allows us to fine-tune the behavior of our composite request to match the specific requirements of our business logic.
Right.
Right? We can strike a balance between ensuring data integrity and allowing for flexibility where it makes sense.
This is reminding me that the composite API isn't just about like brute force efficiency.
Yeah.
It's also about control, precision, and the ability to tailor its behavior to our specific needs.
Totally.
Are there other ways we can exert this level of control within the Composite API?
Absolutely. Beyond conditional logic, the Composite API provides features like response referencing,
Okay.
which allows subsequent subrequests to utilize data returned from earlier
Oh,
subrequests.
wow.
It's like building a chain of actions where each step can intelligently adapt based on the result of the previous steps.
That opens up some interesting possibilities.
does.
We can create dynamic workflows within a single Composite API call, reacting to real-time data and
Yeah.
adjusting the course of action accordingly.
Exactly. It transforms the Composite API from a simple bundler of requests into a sophisticated orchestration engine,
Wow.
capable of handling complex multi-step processes with grace and efficiency.
This is all incredibly powerful stuff.
Yeah.
But before we get carried away with the possibilities, are there any caveats or limitations we should be aware of when venturing into this realm
Right.
of conditional logic and response referencing within the Composite API?
Yeah, so while these features offer tremendous flexibility,
Right.
it's important to use them judiciously.
Okay.
Overly complex composite requests can become difficult to manage and debug, so it's crucial to strike a balance between sophistication and maintainability.
So it's about finding that sweet spot where we leverage the power of the Composite API
Right.
without sacrificing clarity and simplicity in our code.
Exactly.
Are there any other considerations we should keep in mind as we explore these advanced capabilities?
Yeah, I mean, performance is always a factor. While the Composite API optimizes network communication, complex logic within the request itself can still impact processing time on the Salesforce side.
Right.
So it's essential to thoroughly test and optimize our composite requests
Yeah.
to ensure they perform efficiently, especially when dealing with large volumes of data or complex workflows.
This is all starting to paint a very comprehensive picture of the Composite API. It's not just a one-trick pony for bundling requests.
Right.
It's a versatile tool
Yep.
that offers a range of features for managing complex data interactions within Salesforce.
Exactly. And we've only scratched the surface of its capabilities.
Really?
There are even more advanced techniques and best practices that we can delve into to further refine our use of this powerful API.
Wow, this has been an incredible deep dive so far. I'm
Yeah.
starting to grasp the true power and flexibility of the Composite API.
It's a game changer for sure.
It is.
But as with any powerful tool, it's important to use it wisely and thoughtfully.
Well, before we wrap up, any final words of wisdom or parting thoughts for our listeners as they embark on their own Composite API adventures?
I think the best advice is to embrace that iterative process. Start with a simple use case, maybe something you normally handle with multiple API calls.
Right.
Break it down into those sub-requests, experiment with the Composite API, see how it streamlines that workflow.
So start small, get comfortable with those fundamentals, and then gradually increase complexity.
Exactly.
It's like building up your API muscles, right?
Yeah, totally. And don't be afraid to lean on the wealth of resources that Salesforce provides, right?
Yeah.
That documentation is incredibly comprehensive with detailed examples and best practices.
Speaking of resources, are there any tools or techniques that can help developers master the art of crafting these efficient Composite API requests?
Absolutely. Salesforce's developer console, that's your playground. It allows you to test and refine your Composite API calls in a safe sandbox environment before kind of unleashing them in your live applications.
So it's like having a virtual lab for experimenting and perfecting our API skills.
Totally.
What about debugging? When things inevitably go wrong, how do we unravel those complexities of a composite request gone awry?
Yeah, so debugging can be a bit more intricate with those composite requests since we're dealing with multiple operations bundled together.
Right.
But the response structure, it provides a granular view of each subrequest's outcome, right? Including that success or failure, status codes, and detailed error messages when things kind of go sideways.
So it's like having that breadcrumb trail to follow, helping us pinpoint exactly where things went off track. Any other tips for making debugging a bit less daunting?
Tools like Postman or Insomnia, those are invaluable, for making and inspecting those API requests, including composite requests. They offer features for formatting those requests, viewing those responses, even simulating different scenarios to kind of help you understand how those API calls are behaving.
It's like having a specialized toolkit for kind of dissecting and analyzing our API interactions there. Are there any common pitfalls or gotchas that developers should watch out for when working with the Composite API?
One thing to keep in mind is the potential for cascading failures. So when sub-requests are dependent on each other, a failure in one can trigger a domino effect, right? Impacting those subsequent sub-requests.
Yeah.
So it's crucial to carefully consider those dependencies and design your requests to handle those potential failures gracefully.
So it's like a game of strategic API Jenga.
I like that.
We need to make sure our structure is solid and can handle a few wobbles without completely collapsing. Any other words of caution?
Yeah, I mean, rate limits are always a consideration when working with any API.
Right.
And the Composite API is no exception. So while it reduces the number of overall calls, each composite request still consumes a certain amount of your API allowance. So it's crucial to understand your organization's limits and design those applications accordingly.
So efficiency doesn't mean we have an unlimited buffet of API calls.
Right.
We still need to be mindful of our consumption and stay within the boundaries. Any final words of wisdom before we wrap up our Composite API deep dive?
The beauty of the Composite API is that it's constantly evolving. Salesforce is continuously adding new features and enhancements, so stay curious, keep exploring the documentation, and never stop experimenting.
It's a reminder that in the world of technology, learning is a lifelong journey.
It is.
There's always something new to discover, especially within that ever-expanding Salesforce ecosystem.
Totally.
Well, there you have it, the Salesforce Composite API, a tool for efficiency, a catalyst for innovation, and a gateway to unlocking the true potential of the Salesforce platform.
It has been a pleasure diving deep into this fascinating topic with you.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Salesforce.